Probably we have some question from the floor, so that I'll try to use my time in a smart way. Well, as you see here, the session 1, impact evaluation and new approaches to governance. And I thought, well, there are 3 presentations, and there are underlying sort of shared topics and interests, though seemingly they are very different among the 3 presentations. But I think there are some underlying themes that we can identify, which are how can we improve the quality of government and the good governance as well as good society. And I think there are underlying interests that the 3 presenters all have, though the sectors are quite different, but I think we see that. And another one is, does management matter and human behaviors matter? And I think that's something that we can think of. Also, they're all interested in public values and ethics. So that's another theme that we can think of. And the other one is data and evidence and machine learning and AI. So that some of the new technologies, how technology and data help to solve some of the issues and problems that we are all facing with. Particularly, there are so many complicated and wicked problems we are facing with, and how data and the evidences help us to solve those problems. And I think that's another underlying interest. And the other one is, well, those are all very innovative approaches, which are quite different from the conventional approaches we have been observing. So that there are a lot of questions in the future we can think of. The first one is the allocation of authority in organization. That's based on the 2-year experiment, field experiment in Pakistan in the area of procurement. So that I think it's quite interesting, because whether we should give autonomy to public managers in dealing with their routine tasks. And then, of course, there are layers of in hierarchical systems. And there are 2 things they paid attention to. One is level of autonomy they have, and the other one is incentives, pay for performance and how that matters. So that, hypothetically, a lot of people think that, well, autonomy, good, and then pay for performance, good. And the question is it really true in a procurement setting and in Pakistan particularly? So that they actually looked at the data collected for 2 years. And the bottom line finding is that, well, autonomy helped to reduce the prices, so the positive impact in general, and then not necessarily the incentive pay for performance. And then another line of finding is that, well, the pay for performance works good when the monitors, in other words, when they make a quick decision. So that, in other words, monitors are working good, and then pay for performance matters. So I think it's not just the one side, and I think it's very interactive, and I think that's quite common in organizational setting. So that autonomy and the incentive, which are 2 compelling issues we are considering in public organization all the time. It's hard to read. The one that I have here, I try to, so some of the thoughts and questions we can think, and I want to ask the speaker, the managerial dimensions and then behavioral dimensions. And of course, what we can do as a manager, top-level manager, when you design autonomy, the level of autonomy you want to offer, and then incentive system in public organizations. And how the design of autonomy and how the pay for performance actually affect frontline public managers, that's another question. So that's why we are interested in behavioral aspects. Personally, I had one experiment study which I just published, which I tried to look at the public managers' perception on red tape. When you think of red tape, the rules and regulations, stages, and different levels, one is horizontal, so that you have different rules, and then you should check, and then before you make a final decisions, and then you should check another one, another one, so that you have different rules and regulations you should go through. So that's a horizontal level, and the other one is hierarchical level, vertical level red tape, so that you should go to one person, your boss, and then you should get approval to another person, upper level, so that how that affect individual behaviors in doing their routine work. And I think that's quite relevant to the study we heard this morning and this evening. And authority-wise, and it's very interactive. It's relational. It's not just the one side. And if you recall the administrative behavior written by Herbert Simon, and authority as a zone of acceptance and a zone of indifference. It's very relational ones. So it's not necessarily authority given to the position per se, but the extent to which it's received and accepted by the people. So it's a very interactive aspect. And the other one we can think of is when we consider corruptions and misbehaviors in public organizations, is it really individual level factor is important, or organizational factor, or system level? For example, it's been e-procurement, and a lot of corruption people consider e-procurement system, if you design well the system, and then you may prevent corruptive practices in procurement. Is it really true? And in fact, it's not necessarily true. So the human and system and which solution we should refer to. In many cases, the e-procurement can solve a lot, but not necessarily true. So that I think that's something that we can think of. Another question that I want to give and think together is that what if we have the same study in other than procurement area? What if we have the same study in not developing countries, but developed countries? Is it really same or different? I think that's something that we can think of. Technology-enabled solutions, again, e-procurement. Or I just wonder, after this study, is there any something, real new practices actually introduced in Pakistan? And that's something that I want to hear as well. Oops. Wow. Okay. Okay, second presentation is data and evidence for justice reform, e-justice system. Very interesting, and it has a lot of implication for other areas, because AI-based systems, not only in justice systems, and we all know it has been applied to many different professional areas, including medicine and accountings. It's quite interesting to see whether justice system is always just. And I think, as we heard a lot this morning and this evening, personal bias, and there are a lot of empirical research out there, as the Professor Chan, Dr. Chan shared with us today. Does machine learning enhance the rule of law? And human factors, emotion, judgments, and situations, circumstances. And I also read the article on judges' cases when their local football team lost or wins. That affect quite a bit. That's so the personal basis and circumstances factors. Do individual circumstances matter? Predictive policing and predictive judicial analytics, so that there are a lot of things that we can think of. And AI, if you go to the Will Robots Take My Jobs, that's a website, and for your interest, and you may visit there. so that if you put some jobs, and then you can see how AI and robots replace those jobs. Accountants and auditors, 94% will be replaced in the future. I don't know when, but 20, 30, 40, 50. And then here, judges, 40% will be replaced. And then pattern work, legal work, more manual and collecting data and things like that, 94%. And personally, I'm interested in robots will take my job, political scientist or public administration, PhDs, 4%. So my job is not necessarily soon replaced. But again, professional field, medicine, particularly radiology readings and image readings, AI been introduced quite widely. It's true in election and predicting election and things like that. And then the predictive policing, so that analyzing the data on crimes, and then under particular circumstances, weather and location, and then you send a patrol, and then that will reduce the crime. So that's quite commonly introduced. And there are EU Commission's report on European ethical charter on the use of artificial AI in judicial systems and their environment. And those are some of the things widely discussed among practitioners and scholars, and even the private sectors, because they design AIs in many ways. So the ethical guidelines, and then some of the ethical guidelines in the charter they call here in this case, AI in judicial systems, and some of the guidelines, particularly here transparency, quality, and fundamental rights of humans, and those are some of the things, and also the under the user's control, and then transparency. Those are very common things. And personally, I had one project with Google and with other scholars, and my question was, well, should we moralize AI prior to legalizing or regulating AI? So that now we are in the soft area, so that we try to make the AI moralized. But as we put that in practical legal systems, and then it should be more specific, so that industries and designers and users, and government, of course, working together and hammering out the ethical guidelines as well as some of the regulation on AI. And that's very common things, not only in the justice system, but also in many other fields. So that's something that we should think of. So that again, the question is how we really cope with the bias, and then the decision we have AI assisted, and who should be accountable, and then can we make decision accountable when you have some AI assisted judgment, and then whether or not you take it or not is your call and judge's call or any professional's call, and who should be responsible. So that goes back to the ethical guidelines for AI. So I think there are multiple issues that we need to think of. The third presentation we heard, there are a lot of issues Professor Lee mentioned. Overall, it's a social innovation lab, data-driven public governance, and etc. There are a lot of things that we can think of, and there are things that Professor Lee mentioned: innovation ecosystem, and innovations are at different dimensions. Technological innovations, and then in economic area, there are a lot of innovations. And then social innovations that Professor Lee referred to today. And the other things that presented was lab, data-driven public governance, open data, open government initiative, and in fact, there are sort of paradigm changes. Open data and transparency, that's conventionally it's based on the freedom of information, so that you provide information to the people. And then now, not only transparency purposes and meet the right to know of the people, but also the economic implications and innovation implications and problem solutions, so that there has been extension from the conventional open data to these days open data and open government initiatives. One example would be the facial mask app developed by a group of people in Korea. In probably many of you recall that the government had a really big headache how you distribute facial mask in the middle of a shortage of facial mask. And then government decided to distribute facial mask through drugstores. And the question is, there are people lined waiting for the facial mask, and they really eager to find which drugstores still they have stocks. So that government decided to use the open data, so that and because that's part of the medical public insurance systems, and so that it's, and also it's public facial mask, so that they legitimize facial mask stocks, not private business information of particular drugstores, but it's a public information. And then they could open, and then within 1 week, and in fact, it took only 3 days, and a group of people, they got together and then developed apps. It's possible because the government decided to make the data open. In fact, at the beginning, some of the drugstores, they didn't want to open the data. They thought it's their business data. Well, open data, there are many data open, and it's more than 30,000 data open in Korea as of last year. There are a lot of apps developed based on the data opened by the government, and many of them actually, that's part of the social innovations. And then working together, government and citizens and small businesses together. And this is the Korea as of May this year, and how many data opened in different areas, and how many APIs shared, so that there are a number of areas where you have a lot of data, culture and tourism, so that a lot of tourism apps available and developed because of the open data in that area. Land management, such as the prices of apartments and things like that. So reflecting the people's citizens' interest, and then there are a lot of data open, and there are many apps developed using that data. Industry and labor and transportation and social welfare and etc. And now there are many apps developed, and in fact there are part of the social innovation to solve the problems that we have. And I just want to share, as we hear from the Finland case, Finland is one of the excellent examples, open data and really catching two birds, transparency and solving social problems with the data and through the social innovations. This is Jeju Island case. Jeju Island is one of the excellent case using the data and also social innovation. They use the public Wi-Fi, and then they collect where people go and the tourists, so that they make a lot of policy decisions for tourism based on the data they collect. And this is another one. You see that there's a lot of the hiking courseworks in Jeju Island, but there are many courses. The physically disadvantaged population, they don't have quite easy access, so that they try to get idea from the people and have people solve the problem, so that they really try to build a map for the physically disadvantaged population, so that they can use the the app. So a lot of problems, solving the social problems that we are facing with. And I think it's based on data and it's based on citizen participation and etc. And, whoops. And the other one is not the Jeju Island case, 2 years from your view on the far right. That's the photo that I took in Copenhagen, in Denmark. Of course, there are a lot of bicycles. And then sometimes in the road, you have much wider bicycle lane than automobiles. And I wondered, how you make that decision, because there are a lot of people drive at the same time, a lot of people ride bikes. And actually, they're checking the number of bikes passing, as you see. And then actually, that's the data they use when they make policies. Whether or not they should widen bike lane or just to maintain as it is, so that whatever decision we make, and I think the evidences and data are quite important. And there are several things that I want to share, and then I'll stop. Social innovation policy in Europe, including Finland, where the next there's one report. And social innovation is different from traditional conventional innovations in terms of the scale, goals, and participants and actors. And also there's a difference between policy as social innovations and policy for social innovations. And of course, the government should make a lot of policies for social innovations, facilitate and promote social innovations. And then sometimes policy as social innovations. Policy can do a lot as well. So I think there are two dimensions we can think of. And the other one is some of the guiding principles for social innovations, which Professor Lee also mentions, citizen-centric. That's also very important. Problem-centered and collaboration and transparency and data and experimental. Those are some of the things that we can think of. So again, the main compelling issues: who should involve social innovations, actors, where, university, government, businesses, group of people, and how, what are the tools and methods, critical success factors, and sometimes we do have failure factors. So that I think we also need to look at failure cases. I just wonder, Professor Lee has some cases, failure cases. Policy for social innovations versus policy as social innovations. And that's something that we can think of together. And if Professor Lee responds to that, and then it'll be appreciated. My last slide is this, from Einstein. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving, of course, forward. So I think there are a lot of things going on. AI, data, social innovations, and some of the new ideas. But we cannot change the government policies overnight. So that I think, small adjustment, but still changes and innovations based on new circumstances, new evidences, and that's what I thought, well, balancing, but we should go forward, moving forward. Thank you.